Dragon Ballers, real quick before we get into today's video, just want to share something with you guys that I am very excited about. PPG is going to be hosting the Pro Support TCG weekend in Dallas, Texas, the weekend of November 6th. It's going to be a giant TCG convention weekend hosting all your favorite games, obviously Dragon Ball Super, Digimon, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and more. Tournaments for all those. I'm actually going to be there commentating the Dragon Ball Super side of things, the main event on Saturday, the side events on Sunday. I absolutely cannot wait. And if you guys missed out on Gen Con or heard me talk about how much fun that was, you're 110% going to want to be at the Pro Support TCG weekend. The other great thing too is it's just 2 weeks before Nationals, the biggest Dragon Ball Super tournament of the year, so you can get some invaluable practice there. But besides that, it's a convention. It's going to be so much fun, especially for those of you guys like me that just absolutely love trading card games. Definitely check it out. The link to sign up will be in the description. I really hope to see you guys there. Now let's get into the video. Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about the Saiyan Showdown Set 15 ban list, wish list, and prediction. So I'm going to go through my thoughts on what Bandai is probably going to do versus what I think or want them to do. And yeah, we're going to go through that today. We almost have the full Set 15 spoilers. So the ban list announcement should be coming soon. It's usually 2 to 3 weeks before the actual set drops, and we're coming up on that point. So I figured it was time to talk about this stuff. But anyways, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, there are many links to do so down in the description as always. But if you guys want to stay up to date on the most competitive content, make sure to subscribe to the Patreon. You can read the articles I post there, and you can even inquire about some coaching if you're getting ready for Nationals or want to be really well equipped for the new season following Nationals. But anyways, let's get into the video and the cards. Alright, so I think the most obvious card on everyone's chopping block is Violent Rush Bojack. There are many ways Bandai could go about this, but firstly, I just want to talk about the quote-unquote issue with the format. Now, I think a lot of people agree with this, and I think that there is not much that needs to be done to this format. There are maybe a few cards that could be adjusted, like Violent Rush Bojack, but in reality, this format is just so much better than what we were possibly going to be stuck with before the emergency ban list that there's very little needs to be done. Plus, there's a lot of barrier interaction coming out in Set 15, so that technically makes Violent Rush Bojack even a bit weaker. But still, the card's very powerful. It's very similar to Zeno Button, but this card actually gives you a body that without barrier removal is tough to deal with. And it also cycles through your deck, which is a very kind of overlooked point of the card. You get to untap that energy, not lose any cards from hand, and see a new card in your deck, which is all insanely powerful. The thing with this card, though, is, and the minor problem with blue and blue-yellow in the format, just compared to everything else and why it's so you know, far beyond the power level of most other things. And don't get me wrong, there are powerful colors, powerful decks in certain colors like Gogeta Xeno in black, Cell Surge in green, for example. But the reason that blue and blue yellow are just so far above most other decks is because the excess amount of energy you get to play with both offensively and defensively. There are many cards that contribute to this, Violent Rush Bojack being one of the main ones, but we will talk about some other ones in this video. So that's a big reason why Violent Rush Bojack is on the chopping block. Now, what could they do to this card? They could outright ban it. They could limit it to 1 copy per deck, which would be a little bit weird because if they hit this and Zamasu Eliminator, which we will talk about in just a bit, that would probably altogether kill blue yellow if they hit both those cards in really significant ways. But the other thing they could do is errata this to a Bojack leader only. Now, what would I prefer them to do? Probably errata this to Bojack leader only, because Bojack decks themselves, like the full archetypes, haven't really gotten the time to shine. Like, they just get outshined by most other blue and yellow decks because of the colors that Bojack leaders are in. So if you take a really powerful card like Violent Rush Bojack and restrict it to a much weaker archetype and lock it there, that's where you can find a better semblance of balance. So I think that would be a pretty good way to go about it. What do I think is more likely, though? I think they're going to limit the card to 1 or ban it. I feel like that's just the way they're going to go about it because of how similar it is to Zeno Button. I could really see them outright banning it. And this would be a really big hit to blue-yellow. But if this were the only hit to blue-yellow, I don't think it would outright kill the color combination. But what might really kill the color combination is if they were to ban or really harshly hit Bojack and also ban Zamasu the Eliminator. So again, what could they do to Zamasu Eliminator? They could ban it, they could limit it to 1, or they could errata it. I think the errata would probably be to the counterplay, not allowing it to interact with unisons. obviously Zamasu the Eliminator interacting with Unisons is the most powerful part of the card, and most other, decks and colors can't really do that. You can't interact with Unisons in that way. So they could errata that, make it only hit battle cards. The card would still be really good in blue yellow because you would just be able to stop most things 4 or less. You'd be able to get that Chomp the Trickster type of effect on a boss monster, and you would also get the check land ability, which would be very, very good. But if they were to limit it to 1 or ban the card on top of hitting Bojack, I think blue yellow as a color combo would be dead until they printed some better blue yellow support. But I really don't think they're going to ban the card, mostly because of this exact printing, the finals distribution in the promo packs. It's going to get probably the same treatment as King Piccolo New Ruler and Bergamo Ferocious Roar, where they're printing it in a promo pack, so they don't want to ban the card. It really just wouldn't make sense to ban the card because they're going to be distributing it. So I think because of the similarity in circumstance to King Piccolo New Ruler and Bergamo Ferocious Roar, I think they're going to limit Zamasu the Eliminator to 1 or errata it. I don't think it's going to be banned, but I do think an errata or limit to 1 is very, very plausible, and either one would be okay. Zamasu Eliminator at 1 with the ability to still hit Unisons would still be very powerful, but obviously it'd be much more sacky, so it'd be a little weird. But the errataing it to only hitting battle cards and not Unison cards, that would be a much more, I guess, like baseline nerf, where you can keep the card at 4. It would still be a solid card, but not nearly as strong as it is now. Like, this card is really format defining in the sense that, a lot of decks that are reliant on turn 2, turn 3 Unisons just have to play differently against blue yellow, and that would obviously change for the better for those decks if Zamasu were errata in that way. So yeah, I think limit 1 or errata. I don't really think it's going to be banned. But now we're talking about mono blue, and in some circumstance blue yellow because of Senzu Bean. But this is what I was talking about before, where blue and blue yellow just get so much energy to play with. And I really thought Senzu Bean was going to see an errata on the last ban list, or I guess the first set 14 ban list. I really thought they were going to errata it to either limit 1, or this card can only be activated during your opponent's turn. I thought either of those erratas would be really, really good because, I don't know, defensive extra energy is not as oppressive as Senzu Bean can normally be when you're like spamming it offensively against tons of dual attackers, triple attackers, big bodies, things like that. But I also think limit 1 would be okay because honestly with limit 1, Senzu Bean probably wouldn't be played at much more than a 3 of in the main board, just because it could clunk your hand if you draw too many copies and you can't charge it, like blue yellow for example. In mono blue you can just charge extra copies of Bean, that's not a big deal. But yeah, you might side the 4th copy against like some low to the ground aggro spam deck like a Gogeta Xeno or something. But yeah, I think that could be a pretty good answer to Senzu Bean if, it even needs that on top of other hits they may or may not do. I'm perfectly okay as well if they leave Senzu Bean as is. I'm just offering a suggestion and also just mentioning that I really thought this was going to happen on the last ban list. But the fact that it's getting reprinted in Mythic Booster, it's definitely not getting banned or limited. I just don't see that happening. It's been around for so long that I really just don't think they're going to hit it. But an errata, maybe. But even then, because they're coming out with the new printing and that's going to have the old text on it, pretty unlikely that Bean is going to get touched, in my opinion. On the other hand, Godsling Technique Trunks, because blue is so powerful right now, Godsling Technique Trunks is the card you need to think about when you're deciding to include a battle card in your deck. Godsling Technique Trunks stops the play of anything without deflect, so it makes those types of cards really, really bad in the format. Trunks has been at 4 for a long time, and there have been certain points where blue has not been very good, and you didn't have to worry about Trunks so much. But now that blue is at the top of the metagame, it's a card you really have to worry about. Again, it makes non-deflect battle cards pretty much unplayable, which is pretty unfortunate. So when they showed the new counterplay Videl for red, I thought they were going to do this thing where like they printed new counterplays for every color. But then they ended up not doing that, and I thought that if they did do that, they would possibly ban Charismatic Villain, Godsling Trunks, Vegeta Powerful Transformation, and just like force us to play these new free counterplays that are a bit more balanced and a bit more stricter requirements. But it doesn't seem like they're going to do that. So Godsling Technique Trunks is not going to get any sort of replacement for blue. But if they don't do something else to knock down the power level of blue decks, Trunks could continue to be really, really insane, nullifying non-deflect battle cards. So I could see, I don't know, maybe a limit to 1, maybe a limit to 2. If I had to give you my honest opinion, I don't think they're going to touch the card. I think they're going to hit blue in a different way, which we'll see in just a minute. But yeah, that's just my opinions on that. Now for 2 really powerful boss monsters in the format, Fu, Shrouded in Mystery, and Android 17, Turning the Tide. Going with Turning the Tide, just what we're talking about, for the past couple minutes, blue being so powerful, there are many reasons for that. Again, Senzu Bean, Violent Rush Bojack, and blue-yellow decks, Android 17 turning the tide is one of those really strong things blue has going for it. Now here's the weird dynamic though. Blue, like Soul Striker, SS4 ramp, stuff like that, in game 1 they have this like insane advantage, which is turning the tide, because blue can play a very elongated game. Like aggro is just not very good right now, so blue can go longer, plus blue has great stally defensive cards, so they can pretty easily make it to turn 7. And in game 1 they just have tide to their main deck, they play it, you both lose your hands, but they have a flooded board and they just get to go in for game, right? Games 2 and 3, Jiren Survival of the Fittest is a card, so that blue deck is probably siding out turning the tide, or gonna try to set up the Baby Unison -5 plus Golden Avenger to make sure tide is safe. But either way, tide just creates this really annoying thing where, again, blue has the automatic advantage game 1, or they have this unstoppable lock with Baby Unison, Golden Avenger, and turning the tide. So I think turning the tide would be a really good card to ban, and I think if they did that, blue's power level would fall down. They would still have really great defenses and stuff like that, but they wouldn't have this automatic top end unless it was for Fu, Shrouded in Mystery. Now this is a card that a lot of people are also calling for to be hit in some way, and I see it, but I don't like it, and here's why. So games are going really long in this format, and it's causing a lot of draws, and I think one of the main problems, like I mentioned before, aggro was just hit way too heavily on the previous list, and a lot of it had to happen, don't get me wrong, but there was one thing they could have undone, which we will talk about in this video. But yeah, Fu, Shrouded Mystery, it is an annoying card to deal with if you're a late game deck, but in one aspect, games have to end. Like, this is a card you're tapping out 6-4, you don't lose your entire hand like you do against Android 17 turning the tide, and it doesn't have deflect, so this card has a lot of answers. Unfortunately, most of those answers are only in yellow and blue, so red, green, and black are very susceptible to Fu Shrouded. But if you're doing what those other colors are supposed to do, like red, you're supposed to be aggressive, black kind of depends on what deck you're playing, but even then you can play certain answers to Fu Shrouded, and then green, you're either you know, pressuring their hand heavily so they can't really kill you with the Shroud. And don't get me wrong, those aren't always going to happen, those situations aren't always going to go perfectly for you in those colors, but like, what my point is, Fu Shrouded Mystery has a lot more answers to tide, and it is a turn 6 just like bomb card that any deck can play, so that is a benefit for the game as a whole. And again, games have to end, so my wish list, Shroud would not be hit, but tide would be. What they might do, I don't really think they're going to hit Shroud, to be honest, because it's been in the game for so long, and it just ends games like it's supposed to. But tide does create that really unfun gameplay experience, so I do expect them to hit tide before they hit Shroud. Maybe they'll hit both, but I just don't see it personally. Then we have the Galactic Buster engine. So just talking a bit more on blue, this is another one of those things that allows blue to do so much for so little. Galactic Buster basically turns any one energy combo in your energy into a pseudo combo and an untapped energy, which is a really insane thing. Now, if they hit some of these other things in blue, I kind of don't see them hitting the Galactic Buster engine, but it is one of those engines that's just really generically good and gonna be splashed in pretty much every blue deck for the rest of time until for some reason it becomes suboptimal. Like, let's just say I don't know, extra cards become suboptimal for some reason, or you can't afford to have all these one drop combos in your deck. Sure, that could happen, but while we're in this like mid-rangey control format, I don't see any reason why Galactic Buster would be phased out. So maybe they'll touch it in some regard, but again, I think if they do other things to blue, like mostly banning tide, I think this is a lot more manageable and not that big of a deal, to be honest. And I really like, personally, I really like just like good cards deck. I know a lot of people like archetypes. I really like good card deck, so I like playing Soul Striker with the Bojack engine, but it's just something that they might want to look at because of how generically powerful it is. Now, moving away from blue and blue yellow finally, because obviously those are the most powerful colors in the format, we have a deck like Cell Surge, which doesn't have like overbearing representation or anything like that, but it is a really oppressive deck in the right circumstances, and it just has that problem that most other decks of this type have had, like Surge Piccolo being the main example, and even like Super Shenron, where I don't have to interact with my opponent, therefore my strategy is much tougher to stop, because if my opponent can't self-awaken, like most blue matchups, for example, Soul Striker and SS4 Vegeta, they have no control over their life, so I can rip their hand really quickly with cards like Rebrand, Cells Kamehameha, stuff like that, and then when I'm ready and their hand is near zero, I can start critting them down to low life, and then go for game while they are incredibly pressured from the lack of hand size. So one of the biggest things people are talking about for Cell Surge is possibly changing Rebrand to requiring a mono green leader and not just a green leader, that would definitely probably eliminate the playability of Cell Surge, but green hand control would still be fine. I don't think you need to ban rebrand or anything like that, because I think Deborah Ritual at hand existing is a really good side deck option for anti-hand control. So I think that's a pretty fine dynamic to have. But I do always think that you know, that leader ability to not have to interact with the opponent is always a bit too powerful. So I think that'd be a pretty good hit, changing rebrand to mono green leader only. But maybe because of the lack of representation in tournaments, maybe they don't even touch Cell Surge. Maybe Cell Surge hasn't had its time to shine yet, at least to that crazy degree. I think the deck is much more powerful than people kind of realize, because it doesn't see as much play. But the deck can be very, very oppressive against certain strategies, which is a little bit unfun sometimes. And then, guys, just some leaders that are potentially on the chopping block. If I'm being honest, I don't think any of these leaders are gonna be touched, but I think there's a possibility. Soul Striker, just the best generic mono blue leader. We've seen this many times, like with the original S3 Goku leader. When a leader just overshadows most other blue leaders for their respective themes, like think about Blue Bojack, for example, that leader is usually possibly going to be looked at for being banned or errated in some way. Soul Striker definitely fits that criteria, but I don't really think it's an SS3 Goku type of situation, because there are plenty of other playable decks within the format that are even non-blue, so that's definitely a thing. I don't think Soul Striker is going to get hit, but I think it's just a possibility. SS4 Vegeta I think is even less of a possibility, but the main reason I bring this one up is because, like, why would you even design Kale in set 15 if SS4 Vegeta is gonna be a deck? Like, don't get me wrong, there are some things that Kale can play that Vegeta can't, but the opposite is also true, right? Where S4 Vegeta can play Tide and Kale can't, because once you start ramping with the Cauliflas, you're locked into Universe 6s with 30,000 power or 35,000 power or less. So I feel like S4 Vegeta might get banned because they designed Kale, if that makes sense. Again, I doubt it's gonna happen, but I feel like if it were to happen, that would kind of be why. But yeah, I don't really see it happening. And then Icarus, I don't think they'll ban the leader. Like, even if they ban a lot of the good blue-yellow stuff, like Violent Rush Bojack, like Zamasu the Eliminator, I don't see them touching Icarus. Even though it'll probably be the yellow leader, it still draws the most cards with the minimal amount of engine required. I just don't see them hitting it, but I think it is possible just because of how prevalent this deck and leader is in the current meta. And finally, guys, this is more of a wish list than a prediction. I kind of don't think they're gonna do this, but I wish they would un-errata Young Invaders. Everything they did on the emergency ban list for set 14 was very, very good in terms of not forcing us to play in this really oppressive, like, turn 2, turn 3 aggro format, even possibly turn 1. But they went ahead and added an energy cost to both the Young Invader effects to play Young Invaders. Now, this is just one step too far. Like, they banned Tau, they banned Belmont, they banned Bark the Resolute, which were all really big hits to those King Vegeta aggro decks. I think they should take off those energy restrictions just so that King Vegeta can kind of play the game again. And I think that King Vegeta would actually be a fine aggro deck if they were to do this. Not overly oppressive, again, because of the bans of Tau and Belmont. But I think that the automatic burn damage, you know, above 5 life, and the, you know, free switching gears and the 1-drop Vegeta to new heights, I think would be just good aggressive tools that wouldn't be overbearing. And if they did take a minimalistic approach to banning or nerfing blue and blue yellow, having an aggro deck like this gain a bit of power again could actually be one of the ways to keep decks like that in check. Because if you can cripple Icarus and Soul Striker before they get to turn 3, they're going to be kind of playing on the back foot for the rest of the game until they can stabilize. And I think that's kind of the grind that aggro and mid-range and control should have to play with. Like, aggro should be looking to, like, really cripple a deck in the early turns. Not necessarily win on turn 2, but, you know, establish a board on turn 2, put a lot of damage in on turn 2, put the control mid-range deck in a bit of a sticky situation where maybe they're at 3 life, maybe they're at 2 life, kind of fighting to survive every turn. And aggro just can't really do that right now. So I think this would be a pretty good card to bring back just to allow aggro to do some things again, because set 15 is not looking very good for aggro. So just my thoughts, guys. But anyways, I do want to know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.